All right, and good evening, Patriots. Welcome back to No Kings on the Hill with Dr. Hill Law and my co-host Joe St. Clair. Tonight, we're breaking down something the mainstream media refuses to connect: border enforcement, election integrity, deregulation, affordable housing reform, and the strongest jobs rebound of 2026. They're not separate stories. They're the same constitutional battle over sovereignty and economic freedom, especially after the shocking revelations President Trump released covering the fraud seen in the 2020 election, including 370,000 fraudulent mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania, all for Joe Biden, including the final total mail-in ballot numbers being roughly over 600K more than they were when they mailed out by the state. Also, please make sure to smash subscribe or follow, depending on how you're watching us tonight. Tap that notification bell and like and share this live so we can reach more people you feel might benefit from our show. And don't forget to engage through the comments. Or check out our website at No Kings on the Hill with drhillaw.com. Going across the bottom of the screen there, where you can sign up with your email to gain access to our weekly blog and engage through our reviews and emails to let us know if there are any specific topics you would like us to see us cover. Stay with us, because tonight we're laying out why the American economy may be entering its most important structural reset in decades, and why we must ensure our elections are secure so we don't lose our republic for good. And now for a word from our sponsors, and then we will be right back.
Heard of Q Broadcast? It's taking the world by storm. People are cutting the cord to their high cable bills and moving away from streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and others for something better. Q Broadcast. For just $60 a month, you'll get access to every channel you could ever want, including HBO, Cinemax, and Starz. And the best part? There are no contracts, no hidden fees, and you're free to cancel anytime. With Q Broadcast, you can enjoy streaming live TV, movies, and top series on up to 5 devices at once. Whether you're at home or on the go, Q Broadcast makes sure your entertainment is always at your fingertips. Imagine being able to watch all your favorite channels from anywhere, anytime, without any restrictions. We're talking about thousands of movies, hundreds of TV series, and a huge library of live channels, all in one place. And don't forget video on demand and pay-per-view events. Those are included at no extra cost, so you'll never miss a big event again. Now, take a second and think about your current cable bill. You're probably paying anywhere between $100 and $300 every month, locked into long-term contracts and hit with surprise rate increases. With Q Broadcast, that's a thing of the past. It's just $60 a month. No contracts, no extra fees, no hidden costs, and no price hikes. Why juggle multiple subscriptions like Netflix, Hulu, and cable when Q Broadcast gives you everything you need in one convenient package? People everywhere are switching to Q Broadcast, saving money and getting more content than ever before. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description and sign up for Q Broadcast today. Just $60 a month, no contracts, no hidden fees. It's time to take control of your entertainment and start streaming smarter.
All right, so this is, again, the O Kings on the Hill. I'm Dr. Hill Law. Today is Wednesday, February 11th, 2026. And on this episode, we'll be tying together border security, federalism, deregulation, affordable housing reform, and explaining why I think the 2026 midterms will decide if this economic recovery continues or comes crashing down. All right, so good evening, Patriots. Tonight, we're not talking about immigration. We're not talking about DHS funding. We're not talking about election integrity. We're not talking about deregulation or tax policy, my friends. We're talking about power. Because when you take away the press conferences, the Twitter outrage, the cable news hysteria, when you peel back all of the nonsense, what you are left with is a very simple political reality. The Democratic Party is not afraid to lose an argument. They are afraid of losing control. Let's start at the border. Democrats are openly manufacturing outrage over immigration enforcement. The Dems say deportations are cruel. They say defunding DHS is about oversight. They claim ICE enforcement violates due process. But if their concern is really about safety, if their concern is really about due process, why would they want to limit the very agency responsible for enforcing the federal law that they claim they support? The mainstream media will never ask the right questions. It is clear what the Constitution says. Congress writes an immigration bill. The executive enforces it. The Constitution is simple. The legislative branch writes an immigration bill. The executive branch enforces it. This is non-negotiable. This is Article 2 of the Constitution. But Democrats are trying to attend the funding of DHS, Department of Homeland Security, the limits on DHS enforcement, search warrants for routine deportation orders, operational limits on ICE, changes that would hamstring DHS from doing their jobs. It's purely political. Democrats know that once President Trump starts enforcing immigration law on a large scale, once 15 to 20 million people currently residing illegally in the United States are gradually deported, the electoral landscape changes. And they know it changes permanently. People, power, politics. That's it. You see, elections are determined by who shows up. Who shows up is determined by who is counted. Who is counted determines how many seats each state has in Congress. If the Trump administration cuts off sanctuary cities with vast illegal populations who are counted but can't vote, well, that's another question in there. If Congress passes the SAVE Act and we ensure every legal citizen is able to vote by means of a national board mandating fair elections at the federal level, voter ID, chain of custody, vote roll cleaning, standardization, and verification procedures, the Democratic advantage they've gotten from stacking the electoral colleges in certain states starts to fade away. Add immigration law enforcement to election integrity reform, you impact the 2030 census. When you impact the 2030 census, you impact appointment or apportionment for the next 10 years, maybe longer. Democrats aren't mad because they care about due process. Democrats aren't mad because they see a potential 10 to 20 year redistribution of, well, they're mad because they see a redistribution of power over the next 10 to 20 years. It has nothing to do with kindness. It has everything to do with control. But wait, there's more. You see, immigration enforcement is just one piece of the puzzle. Legislative reform is another. The third piece of the puzzle is regulatory reform and economic policy. And now we get to the fun part. Trump's new affordable housing bill tackles something Washington hasn't done in years. It attacks supply and deregulation. The goal of this bill isn't to pump more government subsidies into an already skewed market. The goal is to eliminate federal barriers and allow housing supply to meet demand. It streamlines environmental permissions. It cuts red tape. It expedites paperwork. It lessens regulatory hoarding that has kept housing supply artificially low for decades. When you increase supply, you stabilize prices. When domestic energy production increases and pipeline approvals aren't delayed anymore, energy rates decrease. When energy rates decrease, building costs decrease. When building costs decrease, builders build more. When builders build more, we see increases in housing supply, which creates less demand-driven inflation. When inflation goes down, interest rates go down. Economics 101, not liberal or conservative, just facts. And Democrats know these facts. If deregulation works, if opening America up for energy dominance lowers interest rates, if housing supply increases, if we cut taxes and increase capital investment, what does it leave for them? The debate over socialism dies because socialism works when there is scarcity. Capitalism works when there is abundance. And that, my friends, is where the fight is. Taxation is another one. When you tax capital gains, you punish investors. When you tax estate wealth, you punish family businesses. When you tax small businesses into oblivion, you discourage them from expanding or entrepreneurship, period. Remove the capital gains tax and you encourage investors to put more money back into the economy. If you go ahead and eliminate estate taxes and you follow family businesses to pass wealth from generation to generation, which creates a larger middle class. Eliminate oppressive regulatory costs, and you free up the American worker to be more productive and for, again, entrepreneurs to be more productive. This is how you grow the middle class back, not by giving things away, by making things. Not by making people dependent on the government, by creating an environment where hard work is actually rewarded versus being dissuaded or punished. You see, the Democratic agenda thrives on control, regulation, dependence on federal programs, and bureaucratic approval processes. That's what they follow on. Remove regulations, equal less power for the bureaucracy, enforce immigration, stronger border, stronger nation, secure elections, faith in our democratic process, grow the economy from the ground up, less dependency on the government. That is a recipe for dismantling the administrative state, and that's why you're hearing these marching chants. This is about saving lives. This isn't about Democrats sticking it to Trump. All right, none. No, this is about stopping the structural changes that will happen if Republicans control border security, election security, and economic growth all at once structurally. With a fair 2030 census that counts illegal aliens removed and every legal citizen able to vote and secure elections, we are looking at a power shift that could last for generations. Think about it. Democrats may not be able to gain national power, presidency, or Congress for the next 20, 30 years. If we count actual legal residents in each state rather than inflated legal alien population, boosted by sanctuary cities, if we reapportion congressional districts based on that new populations count, if we ensure every legal citizen is able to vote with the same standard of voter verification, the leverage Democrats have used for decades starts to diminish, and they know it. That's why they're so scared. That's why they're panicking. That's why there's all these NGOs pushing all these money into these protests. Hence the posturing, hence the weeping, hence the borderline nihilistic rhetoric we've been hearing. But it starts with fear, the fear of losing control of our government. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for due process. Faithful execution of law should be reviewed. Holding unconstitutional overreach accountable is important. But you don't have to be crazy to understand political motivation. And that's what we're seeing now. These same Democrats who pretend to care about protecting our democracy against making sure every legal citizen can vote, which 83% of American people support. So this is not a partisan issue. This is a bipartisan issue. The same Democrats who pretend to care about keeping Americans safe want to tie the hands of of the very department trying to enforce immigration law. These same Democrats who pretend to care about the middle class want to increase taxes that harm capital gains and decrease entrepreneurship. Smart people are starting to see through it. The jobs report just came out and unemployment is steady. Domestic energy production is up. Inflation is going down, which could mean lower interest rates by the end of this year or even in a couple months. We may actually start to see an increase in housing inventory. Reform the three pillars above, and come 2026, the midterms will not be about who people like. They will be about who delivered. And that's what we got to concentrate on through these primaries. Enforce the damn law, secure the damn elections, cut taxes, remove regulations, open up energy production, which Trump has done now, build inventory, drive down the interest rates, drive down inflation, fire up the economy, and watch how Democrats sue the ever-loving, out of the Trump administration. So it's not extremist policy. It's adhering to our Constitution and respecting economic principles. If it works, we change this country for the next decade, and that is why they are freaking out, period. End of story. All right, guys, that was a lot of information, but stay as I and Joe break down all and debate all the intricacies of the information covered above. So I'm going to bring Joe up, and then we'll start on segment one. I thought I put it in there, but I got to look it up on my other thing. So let me pull it up real quick. I thought I loaded the little cuts into my thing, but I forgot to put it in there. So segment one, we were going to cover segment one for where to go to? Let me get down through it was to do the immigration enforcement and DHS funding. What happened to your camera, dude?
It put the wrong camera on there. I only noticed because I saw how grainy it was.
Okay, so I was going to say, so let's start at the border. Congress is negotiating DHS funding, and Democrats are demanding limits on ICE operations as a condition of keeping the Department of Homeland Security open. The constitutional question, does Congress fund enforcement or control enforcement discretion? Obviously, we got Article 2 Enforcement Authority, 8 U.S.C. 1373. We can discuss federal supremacy doctrine, and then obviously sanctuary state funding leverage, which I know right now we've got congressional members that are trying to work on getting laws passed to outlaw sanctuary cities, but because of anti-commandeering and all that, I don't know how far they can push that. And then also the people saying that Minnesota's governor Tim Walz said is sedition, but the problem is the high factor of proof of conspiracy and force that you have to meet to equal seditious conspiracy. I don't know if we've seen that yet per se. Even though we'd love to see it, I don't know if it's there.
Yeah. You want me to weigh in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, during your monologue, I was thinking the structural changes are happening everywhere, right? And last podcast we had, I think we were discussing at some point the different levels of the courts and the seizure of the courts by the different political parties. But I'm seeing now even some of the moves Trump's making, his administration as a whole is making, are pretty novel and very interesting to me. So I know there's just a military defense area declared today that the Air Force is managing. So you know how secure military bases are. They're putting it's a stretch of 150 miles. They're putting it right on the border, and essentially they're treating it as a military base, saying if you cross into the country illegally and you end up in this area, you're actually trespassing on military property. So they're pretty ingenious in how they are structurally addressing some of these issues. Because once it gets passed off to defense planning and it's part of the military base system, it becomes so much more difficult for even if Democrats do recontrol power, it's going to be much more difficult for them to open the border, at least in that area. So I'm kind of interested in those moves right now. It's been a little bit slow of a news week, I think, but I see this administration is doing everything across dozens of fronts. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Oh yeah, and did you see the news that came out today? How they had to shut down the commercial airspace over El Paso because of the drones from the cartels had flown over into the United States. And I'm like, that shows you the threat of the cartels when they actually have drones that are large enough that they feel like they're a big enough threat that they have to literally shut down commercial airspace and scramble F-35s or F-22s from Fort Bliss to go wipe them out. I mean, that's crazy when you got to deploy military assets but these are supposed to be individual people or something. It's supposed to be, the cartels aren't that dangerous. Well, obviously they got some pretty good money if they're getting drones large enough to threaten commercial airspace. I mean, a little bitty small handheld one isn't going to go high enough to threaten a 737 or a 747 or whatever. It's got to be a pretty large, almost semi-military drone to throw that kind of conflict or that kind of issue into the situation. I mean, it's just crazy to think because that happened earlier this morning. And then
I saw that, and that made me think of, I did 10 years in military aviation, and I was on Bagram. I went to Afghanistan 4 times. I can remember our air defense system there. I don't know did you ever deploy? Did you ever see it's not the Golden Dome or the Iron Dome, but it was the same basic system we had in Bagram. But I remember even as far back as 2015, we were already getting buzzed by drones from the Taliban. So it's pretty low barrier, a threshold of entry these days in terms of how spread out technology is. And it's crazy to shut the airport down, but
that's what I'm saying is for them to shut the airport down, it had to have been a massive sized drone that could have gotten to the flight of a commercial airplane and been able to do any significant damage to it. Because I'm sorry, but flying one single drone into a plane's engine isn't going to take it out. I mean, they hit one bird, they're fine. They have to hit like a whole flock of birds before it starts messing the engine up.
Well, that's not true. That's not true. Hey, one bird could definitely take out an engine. It all depends.
Well,
they
try
to minimize
size
for a reason.
Yeah.
Right. But that's to say the FAA and the body of it, like, if you want to talk about socialism, the most heavily regulated industry in the United States by far and away is aviation. So I've noticed some knee-jerk reactions today where people are like, what the hell is this administration doing? Shutting down the airspace. But it's like, no, this is hardwired statutory guidance that the FAA has passed regarding airspaces. And obviously they're not going to play around with any kind of threat, right?
Well, yeah, and it's also on the U.S.-American border. It's a cartel drone that has crossed international borders. So there's obviously that becomes Department of War function there. But, I mean, obviously FAA would probably shut it down anyways, but that's right in that instance there. It's a communication between the Department of War and the FAA to make sure that nothing happens, because after September 11th, they want to ensure. I mean, there's a reason why we can say, yes, aviation is the most regulated socialist type industry, but it's also the safest. It's one of the ones where regulation has actually worked, versus other places where you got too much regulation. I mean, obviously in a space of an airspace where it's limited to a certain amount of commercial planes and everything and all that, the massive amounts of regulation work, it keeps people safe. And every bit of regulation is pretty much done on the FAA is due to an accident. It's what they get feedbacks. They don't just pass regulation to pass it in the FAA. They only pass new regulation or new requirements based on any previous accidents or wrecks that they glean from that investigation and then order to ensure that that accident doesn't happen again.
Yeah, my point overall was just that this is not the reaction that they had is not this administration. I think any like military expert would probably give the same advice. Any FAA expert would probably give the same advice. I mean, during when Biden was in office, there's the Chinese balloon incident floating over. So certainly this, and another thing too is that, okay, I'm not somebody that's pro-socialism. I'm not somebody that is an ideologue that says, if you say you're socialist, okay, I get it. Some people, the reality is that we've lived in a socialist country since the Great Depression, but I think with aviation, it's not like a horse cart buggy. It's not like a car. I could potentially build myself a car, but when it comes to like flight, the amount of resources, organization, like the number of human beings that have to come together to facilitate flight, obviously that's a huge number of people. So I think it's one of the few times that I recognize that this is an area for the government to be involved in. I see the same thing with any of the supply chain issues, but
well, I was going to say one reason why people may ask why we're looking at this and why this goes into it. Well, the one where this falls into what we're talking about with DHS is DHS funding actually includes the FAA, it includes cybersecurity, and it includes the TSA, or at least it may not include the FAA, but it definitely includes the TSA, cybersecurity, and other aspects that literally have to deal with what happened today. It's not just the Department of Homeland Security that's in that final appropriations bill that needs to get passed. So they're not just defunding ICE or DHS, they're defunding all this other stuff. And it's ridiculous. The only reason they want to defund ICE is because, like I was saying earlier, it has nothing to do with them thinking they don't care about due process. They don't care about anything. And they know that if Trump is able to successfully deport as many illegal immigrants or more than Obama did in his 4-year term for 4 years straight, they are going to be losing probably 10, 12, 15 congressional seats come to 2030, not including the amount of electoral college seats they'll lose. And then if you account for the SAVE Act, that actually makes them clean their voter rolls and makes them verify everybody's citizenship to make sure that there's nobody like there's this lady, I forgot, somewhere up in Boston or something, that had voted for 20 years with a fake identity, but she was an illegal alien. And then you had the other guy that was the school superintendent there in Iowa that had originally had a driver's license, was working as superintendent, was here in this country illegally, and had a criminal record, and he had been registered to vote in Maryland. And these were just instances where they got caught because they got caught for sending another crime under the fact of being here illegally, and that's when it was found out. So think of how many other people could be using fake identities or could have registered to vote, especially there's 19 states that allow you to get an ID or a driver's license without being a legal citizen. 13 of those 19 automatically register you to vote when you get your driver's license. So whether they've actually verified, because there are currently laws right now, the way the National Voter Registrations Act is set up, that they can't ask what their citizenship is. They can't verify their citizenship, even though it makes them sign an attestation stating that, oh, hey, check box, I am a citizen. But that's like, why do we trust go on the trust system? Now, I'm glad that they did a little earlier before we jumped on here, they passed the new HR 7296 SAVE Act, the updated one from HR 22 they had done at the beginning of the year. This one is a whole lot more sound against any legal challenges. Like the one before, I didn't notice, but when I was paying attention to it, but it only required proof of ID and citizenship at registration. It did not require proof of ID at voting time. So now the new one does require the proof of ID at voting time. Actually, no, I might just go ahead and see if I can switch. Yeah, I can do it on the stage. All right, I gotta get to our share. There we go. So let me. I'm gonna zoom it in so it's easier to read too. But yeah, so alternative processes allowed is HR 22, 1796, and S128, but sworn affidavit under penalty of perjury is all three. State's official must certify decision and uniform affidavit by EAC. What is difference is under HR 7296, where it diverges materially, is DHS SAVE database use was allowed in HR 22 and the corresponding Senate 128, but it's now mandatory ready in HR 7296. SSA verification was good in all three. Mandatory federal data sharing within 24 hours was not mandatory or required in HR 22 or S128, but it is now in HR 7296. DHS investigation for unlawful registration is also now included in 7296, which it wasn't before. And then referral for removal proceedings is explicit in HR 7296 versus just suggested in HR 22 or the corresponding S128. So now what we need is we need Congress, we need the Senate to pass this. Any Republicans listening or watching this live, watch it after it. You need to call your senators, even if it's Democratic senator, and tell them you want the SAVE Act passed so Trump can sign it into law. It's a simple bipartisan bill. 83% of the United States American voting population approves it. 95% Republicans, 76 or 72% Democrats. This is not a partisan issue. It's a bipartisan issue. And tell your Republican senators if John Thune will not use the standing filibuster or the zombie filibuster, as they like to call it now, or he won't use the standing or nuke the zombie filibuster, then they need to vote. They need to call for a vote of no confidence and have him removed from leadership and put somebody in leadership that's got the balls to do it and has the balls to actually rule and pass stuff, the legislation that the people who voted y'all into office want, not what you think you want.
I mean, Thune needs to go. McConnell needs to go. Honestly, I saw another Republican today is retiring out of the House for medical reasons. So the Republicans are about to lose control of the House just by medical issues. Somebody says F the SAVE Act. No, I'm in favor of the SAVE Act. I think that it's pretty common sense.
Oh, that's troll.
American Idol. I mean, you have to do more to vote in America, like for American Idol these days. You have to do more these days. Like we have real IDs for flying. Is it not the case that voting is a greater civic duty than flying?
Well, the only argument they try to make Democrats that are in leftist states that aren't real ID compliant is like, oh, well, if you don't have a real ID or if your state's not real ID compliant or you don't have a state passport, then they would need the real ID. Then they would need their state ID plus a birth certificate to go vote. And it's like, no, you would only need that to verify you're a citizen. You wouldn't need that when you actually go to vote because you would have already been registered and proved your citizenship. Now, what I think is funny, but the troll, Eddie told me about him. That's what he trolls, try to get your conversations and numbers up, all that stuff.
Yeah, I remember
that. It doesn't put burdens on the poor because here's one thing. On Crawford v. Illinois, and this is the trick. I don't know how this happens individually, state-wise, but the reason in Crawford v. Illinois, Indiana, Marion County, Indiana, where the argument is that requiring an ID to vote was racist or it was a violation of civil rights or violation of the Constitution because it put up stuff that caused issues or whatever, that it put too many barriers and it worked as a poll tax or whatever. The Supreme Court ruled that no, it really doesn't because you have to have ID for everything. And two, the state of Indiana, including I know Texas does, is that if you make under a certain income, then you are allowed, you get your ID for free. You don't have to pay the $10 or $25 it takes to get a state issued ID or a state issued driver's license. So no, it's not unconstitutional. It's not any type of obstruction. It's not any type of that. It actually, I think we'll see the first year, we might see the voter turnout go down a little bit just because the fact the states are going to have to figure out how to get people's citizenship verified, how they're going to set that up since they won't be able to do it through the mail. They won't be able to mail out enrollment forms anymore. They'll have to be done in person at the DMV or at the polls on the day of. So that might slow down a little bit first, but once that's figured out, the elections after that, I think we'll actually see an increase in turnout due to the fact that more people will actually feel that their vote counts just as one. Whether you believe that there's cheating that happened or not, or whether it did or not, which to believe it doesn't, that's ignorant. Now, obviously, whether it happened on a large enough scale to cause a change in the election, that's a different story. And that can be debated considering everybody will argue that, oh, well, there's no data that shows that it doesn't. Well, the problem is all that data is only tracked by the states. That has not actually been verified or tracked by a federal government source. That's all individual states. So if it's run by a Democratic state, it's a Democratic state, they're not going to put anything out that will hurt their power. They're not going to put about any cheap. I mean, they're not going to. So that has to do with that. But the reason why I was trying to talk about all this is because not just to spend the whole thing on the two big things that came out this week. Obviously, we have the new SAVE Act that just passed, but we also had a major deregulation happen in energy that is going to make some substantial stuff. And then the Housing Act that the Republicans passed through the House, if we can get that through the Senate. I only looked through like the first 20, 30 pages on a TikTok live earlier this week. I haven't finished through the rest of it. And just what it does for zoning and what it does for regulation and environmental and civil reviews for construction permits and stuff will save hundreds of thousands of dollars per project for real estate development and affordable housing. And so we need to get the Senate to pass this bill too, because it's going to make development take off, whether it's in retail, affordable housing, anything, because it's adjusting. That's what I was going to get to, is it adjusts like the amount where you move your trying to get back to the top of the screen, but it does reduction or elimination of parking minimums, higher maximum building heights, higher floor area ratios, FARs, which those higher maximum building heights will help because you can build more units, reduce minimum lot sizes and setbacks. The minimum lot size and setbacks can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars in engineering to meet those. Same thing with with having a parking minimum that can cost you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, depending on what they require, plus subtract the amount of units that you can build. Now, obviously, they're still going to have a calculation based on like how close is it to a train or a bus or city, close to city parking, city transportation or whatever, versus how many people have cars. So there'll still be somewhat of a parking minimum, but it won't be a set minimum. It'll be based off of a calculation to the area that you're in. And then elimination of ADU restrictions, which is pretty much you can build an attached apartment on top of your garage and rent it out. They're going to eliminate those. By right, duplex, triplex, quadruplex allowances, transit-oriented development incentives, standardization, reduction of impact fees, streamlined ministerial non-discretionary review. Impact fees on a multifamily development can run anywhere from $150,000 to $5 million. So reduced impact fees will save another substantial amount. Maximum review timelines, which that needs to be done because I had a project. One of the reasons why I got laid off is because one of my projects that was in Austin couldn't start. And one of the reasons why it didn't get started ever was because of the review timelines in Austin. That by the time they even got halfway through with the review, it was by the time one time they weren't going to be done by a 180-day timeline to get the bonds. So we had to let go of the bonds and keep going. Well, by the time they got through it, almost got through it the next time, the freaking interest rates and everything had gone up. It wasn't financially feasible, and their timeline kept on expanding. I mean, we were waiting to get through civil review on a simple site for 2 years. I mean, that's how bad Austin is.
Well, what does the ADU stand for?
Alternative. It's the development unit. Alternative. It's like the separate apartments, the little ones that you can build like next to your house or separate from on top of your garage or something.
What do they call those? Utility? I think they call
them kind of something like that. But the maximum review timelines will be a significant savings, especially it'll help guarantee that more affordable projects actually get done. Because a lot of affordable projects never go forward because you have to, in order right now for it to be financially feasible, you have to be within what's called a qualified QCT, qualified, well, I don't know why I'm trying to remember, a census tract, or a difficult development area, DDA or QCT. All right. And that QCT changes every year based on the income levels and stuff that HUD used to calculate that percentage. So if you don't get through it 1 year, the next year when you want to come back because they weren't going to have your review timeline done in time to get the 180 days to get your bonds that year, and you had to let the bonds go until the next lottery application session for the next year. By that time, your QCT could be gone, and now that project is no longer financially feasible, and it won't be until that area is back in the QCT. Which honestly, you don't want it back in a QCT because that means that the average person is at 20% median income. it's or 20% above a 20. It has, I mean, no, it's above a 20% poverty rate. Over 20% of the population is below poverty rate. So you don't want it to go back into a QCT, which is one of the reasons why with my doctoral manuscript, I'm working on something to replace the QCT and it not be limited by census tracts for policy issues. But simplifying zoning codes, state level zoning appeals mechanisms for affordable projects, streamlining state and local environmental reviews, and supporting for land banks and community land trusts. The environmental reviews, like in Austin, we had that same project. There was another, we had having two different projects. We got the first project that was approved, and we were halfway through construction. Then they got a new environmental reviewer came in and shut the project down because she didn't agree with the previous environmental reviewers what they had come to, because they have like no standard for what the environmental reviewers go by. They just allow them, they have a minimum, and as long as they do equal that or more, then they don't care how far they go. There's not like a set standard for environmental reviews throughout the different reviewers in Austin. And that cost us almost 10 million in lost revenue and expanded because the project got delayed almost 2 years after it already started construction. How it didn't go bankrupt, I don't know.
I noticed in Austin, they do have a couple of sections of apartments that are like, Austin has its own unique program for not HUD, but I guess you'd call it like subsidized housing. But I was working for a property developer in Austin, and it was like a 5-year process just to get an approval to break ground, because prior to construction, they would have to essentially do watershed analysis. Then in Austin proper, there's specific parking to resident ratios you have to follow. So most new construction in Austin requires to be like 4/1, right? Where you have parking garage built in. So the driving point I'm making is that when you get into these really blue cities, California is a great example, Bay Area, and they have the NIMBY, not in my backyard, and they have these really, really high levels of regulation. It's a barrier to entry to normal people from building houses. There's very little construction going on in Austin right now that's not that style of apartment. I'm not talking about Section 8. I'm talking about 4/1. It's luxury apartments, but the minimum to build one of those buildings is like 20 million. So that's one of the reasons that we're having housing. And then, I mean, also look at what they do to people who build on their own. You can't even build a shed on your own property these days. You can't even. I've seen videos of people constructing, log cabins out in the middle of a homestead, and then government agents coming through and tearing it down. It's like, why is our resources being dedicated to this? And I'm going to go back to something you were talking about earlier, which was the political power and like opening the floodgates, essentially letting all these illegals in. This affects housing costs. This affects a lot of your housing costs are going up when you're competing with people who are getting subsidies from the federal government. These people who come here, and if they can get an ID in California, they might not be getting access to unemployment, but they're getting paid through government assistance one way or another. So that's driving your housing costs up too. That's driving my housing cost up too. So, housing regulation goes a long way towards inequality as well as people being homeless.
And that's why this deregulation bill is big, because like here, point of access, single stair reform. HUD must develop model code language for 6-story single stair residential buildings, alternative fire safety compliance methods, encouraging ICC adoption. This is a building code modernization effort to reduce construction costs and increase supply. Every stairwell, like in an apartment, the whole building can be all built out of wood, but any stairwell or any elevator has to be a solid, like fireproof cement, 4x4 walls of cement. So it significantly increases when you've got to put 2, 3, 4, 5 stairwells plus all these multiple different. Each elevator increases like $600,000 in construction costs, roughly. $300,000 to $600,000 depending on the size of the escalator. Each stairwell is about $150,000 to $200,000. Yeah, it's a lot of money. And then environmental review reform, tenant-based rental assistance, HCVs, HUD categorical exemptions expanded to Section 104 reclassifications, multiple housing activities as fully exempt activities, tenant-based rental assistance, supportive services, down payment assistance, pre-development costs, HVAC emergency repairs, and insurance guarantee supplements. This is environmental review reform, NEPA streamlining the bill significantly extends categorical exclusions and exemptions for HUD and USDA-funded housing projects. No full EIS required. Oh God, the full EIS is on my last project. I think I was running that we were trying to do in San Antonio. It was like $8 million.
Is that some sort of inspection, I'm guessing?
Yeah. It was like an extra $8 million because all the extra stuff we had to do to meet that inspection. And then you have to stop, you have to have the inspector come out at specific points in the construction. So you have to stop construction so they can check so many units on that before you even go to the next phase. Once you go vertical, like you got to stop when you go vertical. They got to come in, check. They got to check stuff with that. And then once you put if you're doing insulated base or floors, they got to check that. Then once you get the insulation, all the wiring and electrical in, they got to check that. Then plumbing, check that. Yeah. Then you can finally get your walls up. Yeah, it gets crazy.
I remember when we were doing the project, it was where Bee Cave is nearby Austin. That's where they were constructing this like luxury apartment, and they got hemmed up for 4 months delayed because they needed to get a certification from an electrician, a specific certification for the installation, but it couldn't be the electrician that installed it. It had to be somebody else. And the guy I was working for, he's an attorney, but he's also a property developer. He owns a couple different businesses, and he realized, he's like, there's only 2 people in Austin who really do this, so they're charging an arm and a leg. And he's like, he was saying, like, this is the kind of mind this guy had. He was like, I'll just hire 3 electricians from out of Texas, get them here, and they can do my units, and then I'll have them work on all the projects for all my friends. And I was like, yeah.
And Troll, honestly, I should have just labeled, as low as our views are today, I probably should have just labeled this affordable housing, because the last time I did one on affordable housing reform, it's one of my most viewed podcast. It was from before we started doing it together, and it's still one of my most currently viewed month after month podcast. Is the one I did on the affordable housing reform that was in the big beautiful bill. This is more of a regulation affordable housing reform than that one was. And I mean, the building code and uniformity code study. Another thing I like it does is a lot of this stuff has to do with studies, and they actually are going to listen to other developers out there and specialists, not just try to create it up in the HUD. And another thing, I'm hoping that the HUD secretary will be at CPAC in a couple weeks, because I would really love to interview him, because one, he used to be an affordable housing developer. I actually met him at Texas, the TAP conference, Texas Affordable Housing Conference, a couple of years ago before he became the secretary of HUD. And because I would also want to talk to him about the policy proposals I have, because that's why we're seeing this stuff where they're actually starting to look more at and listen to the developers versus just a bunch of policy people behind the scenes trying to make up stuff like they know what works best, or like they know it's more affordable. And right now this is really needed, because a lot of the affordable housing projects right now are not financially feasible due to the increased substantial amount of inflation over the Biden terms. Now, while that inflation has slowed down, prices haven't gone down per se. Some of the prices have gone down, like wood's gone down, but the majority of it's just stayed that level. So the rents haven't caught up with it. And actually, due to the massive amount of building at the end of Trump's first term into the beginning or middle of Biden's term, then those amount of units hitting the market all at once oversaturated the market. So that's another reason right now it's hard to get any development going, is because they're still trying to fill all the units that they just had hit at like 1 or 2 times, thanks to COVID's suspending or slowing down a lot of projects, because there was a lot of projects that had to stop because of COVID reasons. I mean,
the cost of construction equipment skyrocketed during COVID too. And they said it was supply chain, but obviously that was not the delineating factor, because it was money printing. That was the issue. It was just obviously it's the same thing with gold. It's the same thing with Bitcoin that we saw like over the last 6 months, where they're going parabolic because they've printed so much money and people are searching for a safe investment. And okay, maybe there's, I don't know, $5 trillion liquid cash in our system right now, but there's at least 100 times that in terms of non-liquid asset valuation.
Yeah, all of this added, all of this right here on 4% deals. This has got to get through. This isn't even including the 50% test being lowered to the 25% test that they did previously on the big beautiful bill that already passed. This is what I was looking for when I was asking for when I was at Amtex. If this had passed before I passed last year, I probably would have still had a job if this had gotten passed last year, because the 4% bond finance, LIHTC deals, FHA insured debt layering, gap financing structures, higher FHA limits, improving debt sizing, reducing financing gaps, enhancing feasibility in high cost markets. That's going to be a big thing. And then the home and CDBG reforms, that's a big in doing. Remove certain participation constraints, revises Chodo set aside recapture rules. Yes. Thank God. You don't know how many deals.
Dr. Hill passionate start talking about housing.
Well, you don't know how many deals I lost because of that. Because my company I was with would not partner with the Chodo. And that's why they never won any 9% applications. Why we didn't want to win 9% application this last year is because they didn't want to partner with a community housing development organization, or Chodo for short. Yeah, every government company has an acronym. So it's a community housing development organization, and it's
Chodo is not a good acronym. No, I don't like the sound of it. Oh, Chodo.
Yep. Expands categorical environment exemptions. Yep. CDBG reform adds new construction of affordable housing as an eligible CDBG activity, capped to 20% allocation. Where was this 5 years ago? Like what? This is such common sense. It should have been done. Honestly, I wish Trump could have got this stuff done his first term. Because the CDBG, that's going to open up a lot of it's going to open a lot of what we call soft in the industry, we call soft funds, to cover it's going to open a lot of soft funds to more 4% LIHTC projects, affordable housing projects, and actually get them to be able to cover the financial gap. Because soft funds is what they need to cover the financial gap, versus because they can only, once they've maxed out the amount of bonds they can do or regular mortgage loans they can do versus the tax credit equity or any type of deferred developer fee, the capital stack, you have what's called you end up with a gap, and then you have what's called soft funds that you can put in there or bonds. And so having that CDBG reform is going to be a major thing. I'm not going to get in the housing choice voucher, and that's a whole lot bigger of an issue. I'm not going to try to explain that all in here. This bill does not amend the tax code. Yeah. So it does not change does not alter the 50% test, but that's already been altered to a 25% test.
I do think immigration is a big deal, but I think housing affordability, the ability for people to find work that can actually sustain them without them having to work, 3 or 4 jobs, until our government is able to do and reverse whatever is caused, which obviously it's the Fed, it's money printing that has caused this serious economic decline or K distribution, right? Where the people who own assets are doing very, very well. And that would even be you if you still had your job, right? Because you're sitting on a house. But then the people who get laid off, the people who end up who are graduating college these days and are not able to find work, like that's the biggest single issue facing our country. And I think that a lot of people, regardless of what Trump does now, if steps aren't taken to make material adjustments to the standard of living in the United States, it doesn't matter if there's 15 Republican seats, like it's going to keep zigzagging back and forth between Republican and Democrat until someone does something to fix it, or the system completely, crashes because of the fact that neither party is willing to cut the deficit.
All right, I'll go right back to immigration. I want to cover this question. I didn't say CBD. I said CDBG. community development. I forgot what B is. It's a grant. All right. It's community development. I can't remember the B stands for. Grant. It's what they give for disaster loans and stuff, like the Harvey grants, all that stuff. It has to do with the type of grant. It has nothing to do with CBD. It was CDBG loan. So try to clarify a little more. And yeah, I mean, I had this guy the other day come up on my live, wanted to get up in the box, and he's coming in there all like angry and shit. I'm like, I'm not going to, and he claims he was an independent. But when I was, we were talking about immigration, we're talking about the SAVE Act and everything. And then he goes, I was talking about like it's crazy that Schumer's come out calling it the second coming of Jim Crow, and all these people on the Democratic leadership or the Democratic congressional members are sitting there going against it when 83% of the regular voters actually support ID and proof of citizenship to vote. And this kid comes on and goes, well, remember during Biden's term that the Republicans wouldn't pass the immigration reform for the Democrats. I'm like, what are we in fucking kindergarten? Really? We're going to use this childish shit? Oh, because they didn't pass one, I'm not going to pass this one? I'm like, that makes no logical sense. And I'm like, and two, that no matter what they try to say about that bill being bipartisan, is it literally had almost a full amnesty program in it. Because it pretty much gave anybody who was in the United States that hadn't committed a felony or a violent crime, a 5 to 8 year path to get citizenship. So, of course, the Republicans didn't vote on it, even though Trump said for them not to. Of course, they didn't vote on it because it was pretty much an amnesty package. I mean, there was two good, decent things in there that I could agree with, but like I agree with the 5 year to do better to get people who are actually trying to come legally and wait in line to come here, try to get their process to where it's done in 5 years instead of 10 years and streamline that, especially with all the AI technology and everything we have today. And that way the lines aren't so backed up to get here. So people are less likely to try to come over illegally. But sitting there and giving everybody who's came here illegally a straight path to citizenship, no. Dreamers, yes, I understand. They're not here by any fault of their own. Their parents brought them, not their fault. Yes, they should be given a path to citizenship as long as they haven't committed a drug or violent felony. Drug-related crime or violent felony, they should be able to get citizenship. But any other illegal immigrant who's come here in the last 2 years, 5 years, 20 years, no, they should have to go home and get to the back of the line.
They should be, dreamers should be required to take a citizenship test just the same as anyone else, I think. Shouldn't just be given.
I'm saying, they should still have to take a citizenship test and go through the process, but they should be allowed a path to citizenship. They shouldn't have to be deported because they've never lived over in their home country. They were brought here by no fault of their own through their parents, even though they were born in that country and they were brought here through it. Then, because obviously, if they grew up here and their parents were already in the country, then their birthright, their citizenship through birthright citizenship as it currently sits, anyways, unless the Supreme Court changes the ruling coming up here pretty soon. We'll find out. But other than that, they would already have citizenship. So it's just crazy that that's what they're fighting, trying to use as Ariane. Is they're not going to vote for it. No, the reason they don't want to vote for it is, like I said at the beginning of the show, has nothing to do with that they care about due process or they care about what's best for the American people. It's because all they care about is power, because they know that if the SAVE Act passes and the voting rolls get cleared, and then Trump is able to deport 3 to 4 to 5 million illegal immigrants every year from this country, and the borders closed, no new coming in, that come the 2030 census, if they don't, especially if they don't win the 2028 election, but even if they did come 2030 census, they will not win another national election for probably 20 years straight due to the massive amount of electoral college votes and seats that Democratic blue states will lose due to the majority of those deportations are going to be coming from blue cities. Their hope, their prayer and hope and la la land of unicorns and candy canes of turning Texas blue will be eliminated purely. I mean, it'll just be eliminated out the door.
Well, I mean, a lot of Latinos are voting Republican too. So, that the notion that somehow, I think even if you gave Venezuelans the right to vote, they probably would not vote Democrat because they came from a socialist system.
Yeah, what was that? I'm trying to find this video. I want to play it instead of playing instead of playing the other. But instead of playing the whole clip, I'm gonna just play the 5-minute clip that he posted on here. So
There
You want to
are-
be 100%, you violate the law, get
just
out.
looked at these systems, and there are a dozen ways to interdict the voting process in these issues, whether it's mail-in ballot manipulations. They can scan and allocate votes, blank votes, whether it was 70,000 votes left in the back room. There's just lots of ways to interdict these systems. So with that, I'll answer any potential questions.
Thank you. Next panel, please.
Can I just
Yes, sir.
ask him to clarify one or two things? When we look at this Pennsylvania fixing the vote chart that they all have, could you explain at the very beginning what that line means, Biden injection?
So at the very beginning of the chart, where there's a circle, it says on election day. What that indicates is there is a spike in loaded votes, 337,000 plus or minus of some votes that were added in there in one big batch. So that was an anomaly in the reporting. Normally, you would expect to see a smooth curve going up, not any big spikes. That's kind of what Greg was talking about, the anomalies of loading and uploading those votes. So that big spike that occurs there is a prime indicator of fraudulent voting.
And that's 604,000 votes in 90 minutes, is that right?
Correct. This is 337 votes, 337,000 votes in that
In that period of time.
yes.
And when you look at this entire curve with all these spikes, can you calculate how much of a vote that accounted for Biden and how much for Trump?
Close to 600,000. I think our figures were about 570 some odd thousand that all those spikes represent over time.
For Biden.
Correct.
And how much for Trump?
I think it was a little over 3,200.
yeah, Joe, explain. I mean, I don't know how much you know about math and statistics, but to have that 337,000 or close to 600,000 over like a couple day time frame, and only 3,200 in those spikes go to the other candidate, that's just it makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it makes no sense, and it seems like they put the bare minimum in there.
I'm going to finish. I'm going to let this finish. And the next part really here at the end of it, it really gets you like the numbers they're about to give out. Just it's astonishing that this is why he was being made. All these accusations were being made against him, how he had no proof and that he was just trying to disrupt democracy and everything out like this. But the numbers that they're about to show of how many mail-in ballots were issued, printed out by the state of Pennsylvania and issued, and then versus how many were counted after election day is just, it's astonishing how they even allowed this to happen.
Well,
Now, just to go back to your original document, this one pager that they all have. Mail-in ballots counted without being observed. Those are the ballots we were talking about that were not observed in Allegheny County and in Philadelphia.
Correct.
Is that right? 682,770. Now, this is the part that is a mystery. Mailed ballots sent out, 1,823,148. But when you go to the final count of the vote, there are 2,589,242 mail-in ballots.
Okay, so that's roughly over 600,000 more counted mail-in ballots by the end of the election than were actually printed out by the state themselves. The state printed out like 1.8 million somehow that they actually mailed, but somehow they counted out 2.5 million and some odd change. It's you're muted. Unmute your mic.
here's another thing too, is that if you looked at historically like elections in the US, there are only 17 counties that have successfully predicted every American presidential candidate since like the 60s. They've always voted for the winner of the presidential candidate. So when you understand like statistical anomalies, in 2020, 16 out of 17 of these counties who always vote the same and always vote for the winner went for Trump in 2020. So it's like that itself is indicative of manipulation. That's what statistics tells us, is that if we see something, if all the numbers constantly fall and align the same way, and then you have suddenly one cycle where it's a completely outlier and then it reverses back, then probably there's something. It just doesn't make any sense. It never made any sense. Everybody knows it doesn't make sense. And they could pretend and put their hands there and go, it's been adjudicated. It's all the cases were dismissed. It hasn't. And if it had been, it's the same thing with the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. You can't lie to our faces constantly. It's the same thing with the Epstein files. You can't lie to our faces. People are waking up. Like, the brainwashing isn't working anymore. People notice prices going up. People notice they can't afford buying a house. So all of these, stop pissing on our legs and telling us it's raining.
It's another thing. It's like, okay, with the thing with Fulton County, they claimed that they had like 200,000 or 250,000 mail-in ballots that they requested, but they only received like 150 or 175,000. Where's that other 50,000 votes? Where's those other 50,000 mail-in ballots? Two, the federal government has the right to review or approve or check chain of custody when it comes to federal elections, because by law and under Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution, Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution, the Constitution gives Congress the ability to oversee federal elections. They can't count the votes and like run the polls or nothing, but they can still verify that the mail-in ballots are going out to who they say that they're supposed to be going out to. They can also verify that when they've come back in that they match the signature cards or whatever they have. They can also ensure that the chain of custody is kept between the regular ballots and the mail-in ballots, and then they can also require the video check, the checking of rolls and stuff on the federal elections. They can't do it on the state level, but they can do it on the federal level. And so it's ridiculous that the Trump administration or that any of the DOJs had to get a warrant to ask to see 200,000 mail-in ballots. If there's nothing wrong with them, then what do you have to lose? If there's nothing cheating, they're good ballots. What do you have to lose with allowing the federal government to count them? You have nothing to lose at all.
Okay, I'm going to respond to one of the comments real quick. The guy said that it is both sides. And he also said, do you think that it's possible that they allowed the election fraud to occur to get a bigger movement out of the right? That's the Hegelian dialect. That's absolutely happening. And people like John Thune, Rhino, those are the people who facilitated it. And those are it was also Trump appointed judges who wouldn't allow the cases to go forward. Well,
it wasn't necessarily that, but also if it wasn't for if we had the Boss v. Illinois Supreme Court President's judicial standing order that we have now, back then, I might say yes, it was both sides. But at the time, Trump was trying to challenge the election. At that time, a candidate could not challenge the election or challenge mail-in ballot rules or regulations or whatever before the election. They had to wait till after the election was over, and they had to prove that it was enough to overturn the election. Which, if you can't count the ballots, how can you prove that? If you can't actually if you can't see the ballots, you can't verify them, you can't go through them, you can't check them, how can you get through that? So not to say that there's not cheating. Cheating happens on both sides, but as far as what happened as big as the left cheated during 2020, and that Trump got called he was trying to destroy democracy, and it was the end of democracy because he was questioning the vote, the integrity of the vote, and wanting to see proof that there was no corruption and wanting stuff verified and accounted. At that time, according to under Supreme Court precedent, he had no legal standing to do it. So then that's why they were able to say that, oh, he's guilty of this, or he's guilty of that, he's guilty of this, he's guilty of that. Because at the time, he had no legal standing since he couldn't, quote unquote, prove that the vote was changed or that he had sustained a substantial amount of election campaign issues, like it causing him to spend a whole lot more campaign money than he should have or something, that he couldn't actually challenge any of the rules or anything like that. Now, thanks to Boss v. Illinois, any candidate who doesn't believe that a certain vote, state or rule or law that they have with mail-in ballots or anything is not constitutional or not legal, or fair, they can challenge that to the Supreme Court now. And only standing they need now is to be a candidate. And so that's
when I
the only
said both
argument
sides,
after
I'm
that.
not talking about Trump. I'm not talking about the 60% of the Republican Party that's actually populist. I'm not even talking about the 20% of the party on the Democrat side that's progressive, if they want to call themselves socialist communists, that are obviously anti-establishment. I'm talking about the corporatist Democrats, the corporatist Republicans, that election after election, they uphold the Patriot Act, Section 702, right? Trump is one of the few people, this is why I like him, is that he actually favors the middle class. He actually favors diverting resources back to the people of the United States, back to you, back to me. And it's obviously there's some lag time in terms of when his policies are going to take true economic effect, but that's what the tariffs are doing. So yeah, it's hard to say that. You do have rhinos, you have Republicans in name only that will vote the same way as Dems. They'll nominate the same people as Dems. They're completely fine with the status quo. They're completely fine falling asleep behind the wheel and letting the current trajectory of the country continue to take its course because they're profiting from it.
Yeah, and because like Elon Musk even said, they scare Trump and he fears them because they can't control him. Those rhinos, they control him. They don't want to give up their cushy money, their guaranteed jobs after they retire if they don't support their full service. So they're happy with the status quo. And you're right. That's another thing I don't think people understand is the timeline that these policies take. Because most of these policies, if you look at an executive order, look at any policy, and it will say like that housing reform bill I said, the majority of it, if you look at it, there's actually a 3-year, one part of it's a 3-year review, the other part's a 5-year review. So it'll be 3 to 5 years before 100% of that policy is drawn up and actually put into effect or implemented through HUD. Some of it will go in automatically. Other stuff of it will have to be created through programs and studies and everything like that on the state level, at local level, working with developers and everything like that, industry experts, all that. And that's the same with almost any type of reform that we go. And that's why I said, especially with a lot of those jobs that came back after COVID weren't Biden era jobs. They were actually Trump era jobs from warehouses and manufacturers and stuff that said they were coming, that were saying that they were coming to reshoring during Trump's administration, but due to COVID and the processes it takes to develop find the property, the state you're going to build in and the property you're going to build on, and getting all your environmental stuff approved and everything can take 3 to 5 years. Those were actually Trump jobs. And because of the shitty economy and the economy that Biden had drove into the dirt, trying to turn it into a socialist world, use it with a green new scam, Trump's not able to turn around as fast this time because he's having to do so much to fix what was left. Where at least I can say with Obama, he left Trump a decent economy. While it was stagnant, it at least wasn't under strain or collapse. He only had to lift some restrictions and a couple of red tape and regulations, and the economy just soared. It just took off.
Are you joking? Obama.
Well, I'm saying,
Bush number 2 and Obama bailed out the banks. And
I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying compared to what Biden left, all Trump had to do when he took a place for Obama was remove some regulations and everything, and the economy soared. But now, because of the massive inflation that we had,
our deficit was still exploding.
I'm not talking about the deficit. I'm just talking about the overall economic. I'm not talking about the federal deficit and federal spending. I'm talking about over economic and like inflation and interest rates and all that. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about all the other shit.
We were at effectively 0% negative interest rates on housing for 10 years.
I know.
Of course, our economy is going to be hot, but at the same time, in 2010, when I graduated high school, I was able to afford to buy a house. I bought a house at 20. Kids these days, in 2015, they weren't able to. 2018, they weren't able to. 2022, they're not able to. 2026, they really aren't able to. So we could trace that. But that's all. Like, it goes back to the political economy, and Republicans and Democrats for the last 20 or 30 years, they've consistently bailed out the automakers, the banks, the people who are mismanaging our economy. And, you know, I get that Trump has helped his own people to a certain level, but the truth is Trump is moving towards deregulation. He wants to get rid of the income tax. There's zero reason. The income tax is unconstitutional. So don't say Trump is not pro middle class. because where do you think where do you think our taxes are going to go? Okay, taxes don't fund our government. We know that. Money printing does. Increasing the deficit does. But that being said, no income tax is a step in the right direction, because anybody who has a net worth of over $1 million is not probably paying an income tax. They're avoiding it. But that's neither here nor there.
No, and we didn't really get to it because we took on the other things. But yeah, that's what I was talking about with the estate tax, which literally eliminates generational wealth. And it's like everybody says they want to build wealth and build a middle class, but yet California is talking about taxing savings accounts. I mean, literally, now you're going to disincentivize people to save money or put money in a bank to save money if you're taxing savings accounts. You can't tax your way into freaking socialism and giving out free shit. It just doesn't work. I mean, the estimated cost for that's what I was talking about. Somebody is like, if they try to look at the cost of a socialized healthcare, it would be in the trillions. I think the one thing I looked at would be like $38 trillion.
Yeah, but so why is that? It's because it costs so much to pay doctors. Why does it cost a lot to pay doctors? Because medical school is so expensive.
Well, and lawsuits.
Yeah, insurance,
lawsuits. Malpractice premiums are ridiculous.
Yeah, but our entire medical industry is mismanaged and backwards stemming back to how doctors are educated. And I tell you right now is that if you give me AI and you give me my own body and enough time to research, anybody could tell you this. Like, you walk into a general practitioner, they barely know what they're talking about. You have to go to a specialist. So our entire 90% of doctors are overeducated, and they don't need to know 90% of what they learn. So why are they taking on this debt? So that they could be wage slaves. Because 50, 60 years ago, a doctor was somebody that owned their own business, had their own industry, did not own money, was known to be upper middle class, breaking into the asset owning class. So even always use the example of corporate lawyers. When I graduated law school in 2023, the average salary of my graduating class was $220,000. If I would have graduated in 99, it would have been $97,000. If inflation had kept up when I graduated, I would have had a salary of $450,000. Why is that not the case? Because both parties have consistently created the same. And honestly, Big Beautiful Bill didn't solve it. We're still printing money. So Trump has to, his administration. I like Scott Bessent. I like who's the guy that he was nominating for?
I can't remember, but I don't disagree with you. But the thing is also, he can't just upset everything overnight. It's like little by little. You can't just, you're not going to get it past 200 and some odd congressional members, 51 senators, if you just wipe everything out and take away all the pie. You've got to do.
Nixon did it. Nixon did it. It happened under Eisenhower. It happened under FDR.
Yeah, but I don't know if I would really use. Don't know if I'd want to use those three, because look how the economy's happened under those three. I mean, look at what FDR did.
But you have to recognize that there was a point in the 60s where people were marching on the Capitol of the United States, and the protests in March were right outside of U.S. Capitol. They were right outside of the Supreme Court, and suddenly a rash of decisions and this happened during FDR too, where they restructured the entire economy, because we had anti-monopoly, we had antitrust laws built in, but obviously during the Gilded Age, it was slowly eroded by special interest, which that's a facet of the central bank. That's a facet of us being in a dual party political system. All these things, permanent alliances, no secret societies, these were all American givens. These were what our system was founded upon. And we've been so manipulated and shoved into this false matrix of existence that people don't even realize it. I hope you're okay. It looks like you're having some kind of sneezing emergency or something. No, we need a flat tax. We need a flat transactional tax, so that whoever is absorbing most of the liquid currency, whether it's through assets, anyone who's transacting should be paying a flat tax.
Yeah, well, like I've said, we should do flat tax. We should eliminate the estate tax, and we should work on the capital gains tax, because the only way to rebuild a middle class is to give the ability to build generational wealth. And right now, that's not allowed. So we got to work on that. we've got to work on. And today, yes, maybe you could have done that in the 60s, but our country wasn't as divided in the 60s as it is now politically. Like a lot of stuff that could happen in the political climate those days cannot happen in today's political climate, because like I was talking about earlier, is they act like they're kindergartners. They act like they're kindergartners. Let me see. All right, stay over there. You don't have your shirt on, so stay out of the camera. Right, there you go.
You're good.
Oh, he's got. There's a password on his tablet. He was trying to get he was wanting me to open it up so he could watch it. So he could watch his tablet. But it's about time to get off here, anyways. Yeah, I don't know what it was. I guess because I didn't book our show a day ahead of time, we didn't see as many. Like, this is the worst episode I've ever think we've had, because even La Natives doesn't have a bunch of people on it. I don't know if La Natives live on another. If he was live on another one, and that's why we didn't get it. We're not getting as many because somebody's watching another live on their show. I'll have to look. But all righty. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and do the closing, and then we can get out of here. So obviously, we covered a lot tonight. We talked about securing the border, safe elections, removing barriers to housing development, energy freedom, tax reform, jobs, and economic growth. And obviously, we didn't get to interest rates, unfortunately, but we'll do that another time. And where the American economy is headed as we look forward to 2026. But beyond all of these issues lies a single question. Who rules this republic? We the people through congressional means, or does the bureaucratic class continue to call the shots through government control? Which is what it seems like right now. Because make no mistake about it, what we are witnessing right now is a fight over the soul of this nation. When the federal government upholds our immigration laws, that is not heartless. That is sovereignty. When Congress appropriately funds DHS to do its job without hamstringing them with enforcement restrictions, that is not radical. That is aligning with our own Constitution. When we secure elections by using uniform standards, verifying voter eligibility, and ensuring chain of custody protections, that is not a socialist takeover. That is restoring trust among American voters. And when we free up markets, allow more energy production, increase housing supply, incentivize capital formation with tax reductions and attrition, that is not helping the rich. That is rebuilding the middle. That's how you rebuild your middle class. You do not rebuild the middle class by taking from one group and giving to another. You rebuild the middle class by allowing Americans to prosper through production. We rebuild the middle class by maintaining a stable dollar, by keeping energy affordable, by increasing housing availability, by setting predictable regulatory environments, by having taxes that incentivize investment rather than punish it. And the left is livid about this. Can you imagine if we take back the border, secure our elections, see housing supply start to rise, watch energy prices start to come down because we can produce it here at home, watch inflation decelerate, interest rates come down, and jobs just keep coming? Think about what Americans will start to believe. Big government is not the solution. The Constitution is. We are not just talking about the next 2 years. We're talking about the next generation or two. The 2030 census will determine congressional representation for the next 10 years. The 2026 midterms will decide whether we continue on this path or put the brakes on. The American people will decide if sovereignty and economic liberty are paramount or if we let the administrative state take the wheel. And it starts with showing up to vote. If you want a nation that adheres to constitutional principles, if you want elections that you can trust, then ensure that, and if you want energy independence right here in America, if you want to see the middle class restored through less regulation and smart tax policy, then you cannot let this conversation end here. You need to contact your senator and let them know that they need to pass the SAVE Act. Also, share this podcast, text it, send it to someone who needs to hear this, call your friends, debate them if you must, but continue the conversation. Don't let this moment pass you by. As I said, let your Republican senators know you want the SAVE Act passed one way or another. And if Leader Thune can't or won't do that through the standing filibuster or nuking the zombie filibuster, then tell them you expect them to put forward a vote of no confidence to remove him from leadership. Republicans don't fall overnight. Republics don't fall overnight. I'm sorry. They get beaten down little by little, year after year, until one day they simply wake up and we are ruled by bureaucrats instead of elected representatives who actually listen to their constituents. We will not kneel to government agencies. We will not give up our sovereignty. We will not outsource the future of our children to foreign competitors. Do not forget to check out No Kings on the Hill with Dr. Law and follow us on all of our social media pages. Sign up for free with your email address for access to our weekly blog, and let us know what you think of the show and if there are any topics you'd like to see us cover. Again, this is No Kings on the Hill. I'm Dr. Hill Law. My co-host, Joe St. Clair. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. Stay educated, stay constitutional, and stay courageous.